The first thing I want to get into is, and I guess we can just kind of like, ladies first, of course. So we'll start with you, and then we'll shift over to Sean. But how'd you get into the space? Like why are you here? Has your background always been in fitness? Like, what made you jump into this?
Yeah, so my background's actually in nursing, and I was a distance runner my whole life. I actually didn't get a gym membership until I was like 26 years old for the first time. And I started my Instagram, like Dala Loves Dumbbells, as this just like blog to be like, hey, how does a cardio girl get into the gym and what does that experience look like? And so kind of just like posting workouts, posting things that I was learning about like protein and nutrition. And really, I was doing that and I was kind of just enjoying it like for fun for like 2.5 years. But during that time, of course, like building an audience, building more of a following, and people started asking me like, will you be my coach? Will you write my workouts? And I was like, well, I'm kind of in love with this. So like, maybe I should try. And Sean was actually really crucial in encouraging me to do that. So I got online, I got a NASM cert and said like, yes, I will be your coach. And now, 2.5 years later, here we are with Sean working for DLD and the whole staff. And it kind of just snowballed.
The origin story, Cody, is kind of, we're tied together, and we met before being coaches. So Dala was a nurse, labor and delivery nurse at one of the busiest hospitals in the state of Texas. And I'm going to shout her out. She actually won a ton of Nurse of the Year awards. There's an award called a Daisy Award. You have probably people in healthcare who are listening who know what that award signifies. And I was working a sales gig for a tech startup, and we met in the gym. Like I swam collegiately for the University of Georgia. So fitness, being in the gym has always kind of been a part of my life. And I saw this chick just like getting after it. And so long story short, I like said, what's up at the gym and exchanged numbers. And then we went on a date, et cetera. So we start dating. And Dala's now posting on Instagram, because when we met, she had a private account. So she's now posting her story, like she was saying, and getting a lot of interest. And she actually at the same time got accepted to be, to go into nursing graduate school for nursing. Mm-hmm. And she came to me and she's like, what would you do? And I was like, well, like, I want to hang out with you. And if you go back to school, I'm not gonna be able to do that a ton. And you're gonna go back into debt. But like, on this other side, you have this Instagram thing, and maybe that could take off and be something special. And like, who knows, sky's the limit. Like I even joked she could make like this like DLD empire, because Dala loves dumbbells. And they used to joke about it was like DLD. And so like Dala said, she started posting, sharing her story. It really resonated with a lot of people looking to do the same. And then she started taking on clients, and in the beginning of 2018, and was doing so well with them that it started growing. And she turned to me and she was like, can you do some of the admin and onboarding? Like, can you help me out? And at this point we were married. And so it was like a family business. And so I was doing the onboarding and admin stuff. And then middle of 2018, she's like, hey, can you take clients? Like, I will train you how to do this. You have a good background in fitness already. Like, I think we could do this. And then the end of 2018, that snowballed into both of us quitting our jobs.
He always tells the story better than I do. I love it.
It's actually always cool hearing it from two different perspectives. You know what I mean? It's the same thing with my story. Like, I feel like every time I do an interview, it's different. like the way I tell it is different. But I love that. It's really cool that you guys have, and this is something we're going to harp on today is in a good way, but like how you guys do it together, which I think is really rare, but it's even more rare how that came about. Like it's almost like it wouldn't be a thing if it wasn't for both of you, which is really, really cool. And it's cool that the DLD thing actually stuck. And now it really is like.
I know, that is cool.
No, but you're so right, Cody. Like it is we used to joke that when we first met, like, I don't know how nurses are paid in Washington State, but in Texas, they aren't paid that great. And like, they should get paid more. And so when we moved in together, like in my job was able to sort of like cover for Dala. And so I was like, yo, you can still do your nursing thing and like do the Instagram thing and like I'll pay for rent. I was already paying it anyway. We were living in like a 500 square foot studio apartment. And it was like, let's just try to like chase our dreams and help each other out. And then over time, Dala started being more successful with coaching. And then, I joined her and it was like, oh, now like Dala has the opportunity to like help me out and help me like work with her, work together and do something for ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. It's honestly really rare. It's really rare to see that. And it's rare to see it done successfully. You know what I mean? I think there's a lot of people. I've even suggested and been told this suggestion of like, be careful with that. like be careful doing it together because
Yeah.
it can get messy for a lot of people. But the fact that you guys are able to do it well is really, really inspiring. It's really cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. It's not like there, it's not like we don't have our speed bumps and like challenges. And we talk about this a lot, like on our Instagram and podcast, just communication and like being open and honest with each other. And I think like, you and your wife, your family, you guys have an amazing relationship. At least it seems that way via Instagram. And that's sort of the main thing. Like if you can always come back to like, hey, like we're in this together. Also, I think because we both like our hero's journey, if you will, was together. And so it's always like, it comes back to like, hey, like we're in this, it's you and me. Like at the end of the day, that like, let's push out all of the external distractions, so to speak.
Yeah, I actually like love to dive in and get both you guys' opinion on kind of that topic because I think that like you said it perfectly. Like you guys have a great relationship, or at least it seems on Instagram. And I made a post about that. Like Instagram's not reality. In granted, I post a lot of pictures of me and my wife happy, my daughter smiling. She's 2. She throws the craziest temper tantrums you'll ever see. But why am I going to post that? It's just negativity. And I think people get stuck in
Yeah.
this like, oh, it's just a highlight reel. Well, no, it's just that I don't want to post negative things that are going to get you down because what's the point of that? It doesn't serve anything. But what are the like the of course the pros and the benefits, but also the struggles that you guys have grown from throughout trying to do this together and work through?
Well, to shout Sean out too, I think one of the biggest themes was the gender role reverse. Because as he said, whenever we got together, I was making like 43 grand a year. I had 92K in debt. We lived in a 500 square foot studio together, didn't have a wedding. We couldn't afford it. We were splitting the rent in a studio. And that was what we got married in, had our first like almost 2 years of marriage in. And he was the breadwinner. And he was like 8 years into his career. He was like a big dog at his career. He was published. He was speaking. He was like jet setting, all around on like company trips.
I was jet setting to Seattle and I would pass by the Renton exit and I'd be like, there's this guy I follow, Cody, like maybe I can get a workout there. So that's when Dala says jet setting, she's like Portland, Seattle.
Yeah.
To me, it seemed like he was just a jet setter. Yeah. Because his career was like taking off and so successful. And what was fascinating about it is he just never acted superior to me in any way. He would always speak to me like I was the one with more potential, which is just representative of how humble he is. He was just always like, yeah, don't go to grad school, keep making 40 grand a year, and let's put photos of you on Instagram. He was like, you're amazing. And that recipe that you made is amazing. And that workout that you filmed is amazing. And he just acted like almost like a proud parent, like where every little thing that I did was just like absolutely spectacular. And so he really instilled a lot of confidence in me. And then, when it came time where I was like, I'm over here, like I'm successful. I have a lot of clients. I'm making a lot of money. I need you to help me out with my work. He was just like, fuck yeah, let's do it. And let's do it together. And then whenever I was like, hey, I need you to give up your career. Actually, like I need you to quit your job. And I think we could really make something out of this. He was like, hell yeah, let's do it. Let's do it together. And then whenever the company became DLD Nation and I really became the face of it. And I was like, well, what if we do this? And what if we, bring on assistant coaches? And he was just like, hell yeah, let's do it. Let's do it together. And we have had a number of conversations kind of having to visit that, how we feel about that, how Sean's felt about that, how I feel about that. But at the end of the day, we just always came back to like, we're married. It's all us. It really is all us at the end of the day. And for the first half of being together, Sean was kind of like the leader and the breadwinner and taking care of it. And then if I were to shift more into that role, just because of the company that we started, at the end of the day, like DLD Nation is the two of us together. And whether or not one person is in the leadership role, we're both benefiting.
I think that's really cool. It's definitely, again, rare, just because I think and I'd love to get your take on this, Sean, like the role of masculinity is very lost and confused to a lot of men in today's society. But I also want to compliment you, Sean, of being what I think that's the trait of a visionary, because I even remember when I first started, I wasn't even in shape yet. And I was trying to change my degree and start being a personal trainer. And so many people were like, that sounds so illogical. And just like what you said, hey, don't go to graduate school, just post on Instagram. Like completely illogical. But he could see a vision for what it could become. You know, I could see a vision, and it took like person after person after person to finally find somebody who was like, you could do it if you wanted to, like if you really got after it. And now like I'm like laughing. I'm like, thank fucking God I switched my degree while I was still a chubby kid. But Sean, like kind of just to carry off of what she was saying, like what did go through your mind? Like, how did you make that shift? And then like your thoughts on that whole like masculinity role.
Yeah, for sure. And those are great questions, Cody. The first one, I'm a big team guy. Even though I grew up in LA with like the Kobe and Shaq era Lakers, I do not use them for how to like get together as a team. I instead use like D Wade and LeBron, and how when LeBron showed up in Miami, and like, forgive me for those listening who aren't into sports, D Wade after the first year, Cody raises his hand. I was going to try to pick up like a Seahawks. I was like, man, could I go into the bag and grab like a Sonics reference?
It's any sport. It's any sport. I'm so bad with it. It's hilarious because my friends give me shit all the time because I'm just like clueless out of the sport talk. But I know who Kobe and LeBron and all that is. So continue on.
Yeah. And you can probably attest too, Cody, is that like the sum should be, you know, the whole should be greater than the parts. And so I always sort of look back on the LeBron D Wade thing, because their first year they clashed because it was big egos. D Wade was already going to be a Hall of Famer. LeBron was going to be a Hall of Famer, and they didn't win. They didn't, you know, they set out to win a championship and they didn't do it. And so going into the next year, D Wade backed up and publicly said, hey, LeBron, it's your team. You do it, you'll take the shot, whatever. But like the days you're not feeling it, I'll put up the points. When you need someone to rebound and pass, I'll do that. I got you. Because the goal at the end of the day is to win rings. I could give a shit like how many MVPs I win. And then they went on to win, you know, 2 in a row. And so I always thought of that with our relationship, whether it was like when we first got together, it was like, yeah, traditional gender roles, I was making more money, but like I was so impressed by this woman who like handled her shit. She was on top of her finances. She was like very responsible, and she took care of like the things that I didn't. And so then when, you know, halfway through our marriage, things started to shift, and like Dala was bringing in more money, which would be like the traditional male role. I like literally told her, I was like, I'm going to start like doing the laundry. I'll start doing the dishes. I'll start cleaning up around the house, because I recognize that this is somewhat shifting and like I have some more time. That's not to say it always stayed that way. Like there was a moment when I joined Dala and like my client roster was like getting up to where Dala's was, and I was still doing all the stuff around the house. And so then I brought it up and I was like, could we come up with some sort of solution to where we like split these things? And like, thankfully I have a very supportive and like understanding wife. She was like, oh yeah, you're right. Like you're doing way more of this. Like we should start divvying the duties up and support each other. As far as what you're talking about, like masculinity, I think there's a spectrum of guys. It's like the machismo, macho bullshit. And then the like, is he gay side? That's like the spectrum. I'm more on the like metro side, and I've always
closer to is he gay?
Yeah. Even I have, you can see it in the video, I have an equality sign on my ring finger. And because I grew up in Los Angeles, ton of gay friends. My parents were in the design industry. So I thought it was normal. And then I moved, you know, go to Georgia to swim, and they like hated gay people. I'm like, what is going on? So it was really important to me to express, you know, my values and my thoughts on that. And then Dala saw it when we first met, and she was like, are you gay? So like, I already have that side of the spectrum to me. But I think where people fall short is they're not flexible enough to understand that masculinity and masculine energy doesn't need to all the time 100% be like the biggest voice in the room and like the biggest person in the room. Like it can have softer traits. Like I was actually on a podcast with a friend yesterday talking about men being okay crying. And it's like, hey, it's okay to cry as a man. Like it's okay to feel feelings. We have them too. Like let's work through them together. And at the same time, I think there is, from my experience, and I'd love your take on it too, Cody, going to be like this feminist revolution. Like Dala, a few of our other friends we have, I know you sat down with Hannah Deindorfer, like all of those are these young women who are like CEOs making a huge impact. And so it's understanding that like, you know, we were working under this one paradigm of men sort of owning shit for so long. But now as we've developed over the last couple 100 years, like more rights for women, more ability to do stuff, like the sort of traditional at-home roles have changed. I think we're going to start seeing more women. And so in positions of power, and not that I thought about it at the time, but thinking about it now, it's like, I kind of wanted to be on the right side of history. And for me, the guys who used to crack the jokes of like, oh, women should only be in the kitchen or go make me a sandwich, always rub me the wrong way. So it's like, I can still lift and like go play sports and like do the guy stuff, but I can also be in touch with my feelings. And I think people should know that they can do that too.
I think it's on both sides. I think I agree with the movement of women being that route. And I think that there's a movement of men understanding that on a deeper level, and I think that, like, for me, it took studying, like, actually the Industrial Revolution basically wired men to be how we are today. We just think like wake up, work, sex, food, sleep. Like that's just like, it's just repeat, right? And that doesn't lead to happiness, a good family, anything, right? Success, because it's just going through the motions. But you're wired in your brain that like that's just what you're good for, is making money and making babies, I guess. And it sounds so crazy for some people listening, but if you really like look back to how society changed through the industrial area and how like factories opened and how wives always stayed at home, like it's crazy how that is. And I think it does wire people to be a certain way, especially men. But I think that movement is getting better. Like, I mean, so for me, like me and my brother are polar opposites, love him to death, but we're just polar opposites. My wife's a stay-at-home mom and I'm the breadwinner and I'm a hustler and I have to do this kind of stuff. My brother's a stay-at-home dad and his wife is the
Wow.
breadwinner, and and he loves it. He's such a good dad. He's just super chill dude, just sits at home, skateboards, and fucking raises his kid. And that's just like there's just different personalities. So I think it's less about gender and more about personality types, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And roles that people fill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, we would completely agree with that. What's interesting, you bring up like personality type, right? We recently got into like the Enneagram and our Enneagram personality types, which is just like, an interesting thought experiment. And it tells you kind of like what your values are, like how much like rest you need or self-care. And we even realized, like looking at our personality types, that I'm more of like the obsessive workhorse, like can do like the 12, 14-hour days, kind of like for days on end, and realized that Sean is much more of like a high achiever, high performer, but really needs work-life balance. And so even looking at that and really like kind of taking a deep dive into our personality types also helped us understand like the fluidity of gender roles and how it, maybe let's just take our genders out of it and let's just think about ourselves as individuals and our personalities.
I think, yeah, well, you guys going into that probably applies to, like for coaches listening, it applies to your clients so much. Like learning how to communicate and to each other and learning how you guys' personalities interact together. It's so helpful as a coach to like, put that on. Like, I don't know if you guys have read, which is one of the questions I want to ask you guys about, if you do any personal development together as a couple, not necessarily yourself, which we'll get into in a sec, but like as a couple. Like, I mean, for example, the most famous book, The 5 Love Languages, that's a great book for communicating to your clients. Like, it's actually really crazy how much it applies to your clients. Of course, it helps marriages too. But are there things you guys are doing like that to be able to get to the place you're at right now? I know you guys are good friends with Jordan and Aaron as well. And it's something that I've talked to them on and off podcasts about because they're really good about that. And I admire it a lot. So I'm always curious about what you guys are doing to be able to operate at this level.
Yeah, it's a great question. The one is, again, Hannah Deindorfer. Like she was actually Dala's like first business coach, and Dala was her first client. So it was kind of like fun for them to rise together. But as it was going on, and like we didn't always have a 2-bedroom apartment, we didn't always have our space. Like we would literally, Cody, kind of work this close and like do voice memos to our clients and just like ping pong. So occasionally we'd leave like a 10-minute voice memo and you turn and be like, "I'm sorry," and be like, "All right, now it's my turn." And so a couple times Hannah would come over for our meeting and we would be like at odds, and Hannah would sit down to us and like basically coach us through it and give us like little tips to move forward and like little exercises that we could do. So those were extremely helpful. Something that we talk about a ton is we're consistently trying to work on ourselves as people. And it's being vulnerable and like open with your partner and trusting that they love you and they have your best interest in mind. But there have been a ton of things that we had as just tics, little habits that we had that we continue to get better on. And like, we'll shout each other out, even if it's in conflict. Like if one of us is pissed about something, we try not to, raise our voice or like ratchet up the intensity, but we'll even say in the moment, like I may express an insecurity and I'm like, "Hey, I'm trying to deal with this." And Dala will be like, "Hey, you're handling this a lot better than you have previously." And so we try to build on those things.
Yeah, I think you touched on something good. Like what's been probably most helpful for us is honestly, we're helping each other work on our childhood trauma. and like recognizing that a lot of our core fears and the like why we act the way that we do today is based on like deep seated like beliefs or pains or triggers that we've never really had partners that we felt like we could work on that with. And so sometimes the focus is more on him, sometimes the focus is more on me, but we've probably seen the best improvement of like our relationship just helping each other heal old wounds.
What made you guys dig into that? Like what triggered that? Because I think that's something that it might be subconscious, but a lot of people avoid, and some people kind of gloss over because they don't think like, oh, like I didn't struggle. It wasn't like I didn't have a horrible childhood, but there were things that were deep rooted in their brain that made them act a certain way, and it's continuing these bad habits. But what triggered you guys to start digging into that?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it is a good question. I think, I mean, I'd have to like give some credit to my mama right now because she actually would always say growing up, don't think about what somebody said to you, think about why they're saying it. And she always put this idea in my mind that, the things that we say are usually just like a cover for like what's really going on inside. And then I read the book in college, The Four Agreements, which completely transformed like my life and was really powerful for me. And I loved the everything everyone thinks, feels, says, and does is a projection of their own reality. And to this day, I literally probably say that quote every single day. It's just been super impactful for us. And Sean feels similarly to me. So we would kind of be in fights and, you're like 2 to 3 hours into a fight and you're just sitting there and you're miserable and you're talking about like who put the vacuum away or something. and then you're looking at each other and you're like, where is this coming from? And I think that we were just so fatigued by talking about the surface level bullshit that we were like, okay, Brene Brown, Power of Vulnerability. Like, let's, pick
Yeah,
off the scab and like look below.
I love that. Sean, do you have anything to add to that, or would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Also, I was married before Dala and divorced, and that was like my worst fear ever because I'm an only child and my parents were great. Like they never hit me, they never touched me inappropriately, but they would like have drag out fights and like threaten to leave each other. And so I remember being a kid, like, tears down my face, trying to like prevent one of them from like going for a walk, just needing some space. And then fast forward and my first marriage deteriorates and then I get a divorce. And so I really got deep into like, okay, how can I fix myself? And there's a great like statistic that I got from a Deepak Chopra book, which said that when there's a traumatic life event, like a divorce, death in the family, whatever it is, 85% of people turn to drugs and alcohol to numb the pain. And 15% like get a therapist, talk to friends and family, like go inward. And the book was like, I'll let you guess which group is more successful at like healing themselves more quickly. And so I had already done a lot of research into my own personal motivations and like intrinsic motivations from my past, et cetera, through that healing process. And it's funny because we always talk about it, Cody, we get kind of woo woo with it, but like the timing for me and Dala to meet was like almost perfect. And I truly believe that I'd gone through that work myself. Like I can't speak for Dala to then be in a space to be able to like be with someone like her. And then like Dala said, it's being vulnerable in the moment with each other and when you're with your partner, because you can't like, I'd tell Dala at, like she said, you're 2 hours into an argument and I'd just be like, yeah, like this thing happened to me when I was 10 and my parents did X, Y, Z and like, it's fucked me up. And then you can only do that if you trust someone 100%. You can be vulnerable. And then Dala's like, wow, I, as a 30,000 foot viewer, can see how that instance has like made you who you are today. So like, do you want to unwind that? Do you want to get better at that? And Dala's done the same thing with me.
I'd love to dive into what you guys do separately too, because like something you just said, like just kind of triggered a thought. And actually, I've never even shared this on a podcast before, but something that I think is really common, especially with guys, is like I always say, like the saying, like I'm good, right? So, how's work? It's good. How are you? I'm good. You stressed? No, I'm good. Like, how you feeling? I'm good.
Right.
Like everything's just good, always good. Like you never want to brag about yourself or talk about how great things are going because you're too humble, and you don't want to say you're struggling with anything because your ego. And there was a point where I was almost like a robot and I was saying that to everybody, and it was really weird time. And there was one day where my wife was like, hey, are you good? And I like couldn't get the words out and I started crying. And it was like, I'm not, like I'm fucked up right now in my head, And being vulnerable, like opened a window or a door of conversation with me and her that like changed everything for me. And it allowed me to start shifting. And then I started digging into this whole idea of like why the ego does this. And I went down like a rabbit hole of personal development. But I think both of you guys, from what I can tell, do really well at personal development together and separately. So I'd love to, we'll start with you, Dala, but like, what are you doing now and what has changed your life personally that you think is contributing to all this success?
Yeah, so I'm going to bring up Hannah Deindorfer again.
Just shout out to Hannah.
Yeah, I know. Well, you know her too. Aside from business coaching, she is a life coach. Like that's really where she shines. And she's like a life coach and relationship coach. And she really can help you just deep dive. And I've been working with her now for like 14 months, and she's life coached me even more than she's business coached me, and allowing that. Allowing somebody to be like, do you notice that you're doing this? Or have you ever asked yourself about your resentment towards that? Or have you ever thought that if you're blaming Sean for this, that maybe there's responsibility that you can take there? And I think that we all have moments, hopefully, in our lives where like little things like that will come up. And you kind of have to make a choice if you're actually going to like sit back and think about it and like look at yourself, or if you're going to be like, no, screw you, you're wrong, you have it backwards, screw that person. And now I'm going to run away from you, Hannah Deindorfer, and I'm going to stop working with you. Anyone that's like, making me take that harder look at myself, and instead kind of like re-upping on that, like doing the hard work, getting uncomfortable, like seeing your ego, like take a few beatings, and then kind of going back for more and saying, what else? And, in that same vein, I've encountered some people in Austin that friendships with them made me very uncomfortable. The kind of people that make you get really vulnerable, the kind of people that make you like talk about your biggest fears and divulge your deepest, darkest secrets on wine night, the kind of people that like hold hands and like chant and meditate together and make really long eye contact whenever they have dinner parties and they do little like ceremonies. And it all made me so unbelievably uncomfortable. And I thought a million times about running away from people like Hannah and running away from people like those friends. And then I realized that the discomfort was, that growth. And that these people were getting me out of my like surface level ego. I'm perfect. I'm doing everything right. This is a popularity contest. I want to be the coolest person in the room, to like, let me shed all of that and actually become like and develop these deeper connections with people, be a deeper thinker, and get happier in the process. So really finding that discomfort and doubling down on it.
I love that you brought up people you're surrounding yourself with, because that was one of the things I had listed to ask you guys. But tell me if you agree with this statement. Great coaches ask the best questions, and the best clients are willing to answer those questions.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I think that's said perfectly. And not that the great coaches like, give all of the answers and then the clients don't do any thinking. You described it perfectly.
I would add to that, a coach shows their expertise via the questions that they ask.
Yeah.
And that the good coaches will ask the right questions to get the client to answer in the way that they need to.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I think that's like Hannah's gift. Like, she's so good at, she even like, I don't know if you guys listened to the podcast I did with her, but she like almost like flipped it and like started asking questions like, wait, hold on.
Oh, which she will.
you were like, am I on your podcast
I'm
now?
interviewing you, stop. But, and she did that to me in, I think we were in Scottsdale when we all first met. And when I had a few drinks in me, but I was talking to her, and like within like 5 minutes, I'm like just telling all my personal information. And I'm like, wait, what's your name?
In a corner crying.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone always gets to a moment with her when they're like, wait a minute, what do you do for a living?
Yeah. She's really, really good at it. But I think that's like, I've always had a life coach. And most of them don't like being called life coaches that I've worked with. But every time I'm like, you're helping me with life. You're not just business. You're not just fitness, anything like that. And time after time, the best coaches I've ever had always ask me the best, deepest questions and make me get uncomfortable. Like every time. I had one coach that literally basically forced me to do improv, like just to like get me uncomfortable. And I like really didn't want to do it. So I ended up getting in a car, not knowing where we were going. And guess where we showed up? In Hollywood at improv. And I was like shitting my pants. It was scary. So, but the point is he was constantly trying to get me to do more things that made me uncomfortable and asking me deep-rooted questions that I didn't want to answer. You know, I think that's huge that you said that.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Cody. I told Dala, we do these mindset training calls with our team, and we started them during COVID, during quarantine, because obviously, like we were talking about before recording this, COVID sort of pointed out that we really need to focus on mindset as coaches. And so we were like, well, we have this huge team, like everyone's doing meetings on Zoom now. So I started hosting these mindset training sessions. And the first couple, like not that many people showed up. And so I'm getting used to like 5 people, whatever. And then I log in, there's like 30. And obviously, you know, it signified that we were doing a good job, but I felt my heart race. I was like, oh God, like I'm getting nervous. And I got off and I told Dala, I was like, dude, there were 30 people on. Dala's like, how'd that feel? And I was like, I was so nervous and so anxious. And I paused and I was like, but I haven't felt that way in a long time. And I know that that feeling like brings growth. So I was like, even though I'm nervous, I'm like really excited about this.
Yeah, I think it's you have to force yourself in those situations. It's even like when I saw you guys, there was like 130 people at that event. I was scared shitless, even though I knew a lot of people were like there to learn from me. I was so scared to get up there. But like for me, and I think as you do that, you start to go like, this is gonna suck in a way, but like I'm so excited for how I'm gonna feel afterwards, because you know it's gonna like just add to your growth. But a lot of people don't have that mindset of like, doing this uncomfortable thing is going to feel good later, you know?
Yeah, 100%. That's also the gym, right? Like
I was just going to say, it sounds like a workout.
Yeah, 100%.
Even.
yeah, or like I literally did a check-in today for a client who was like, oh man, I've been struggling to get to the gym, but I feel great after I do it. And I'm like, hold on to that. Like that'll get you out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, 100% agree. So Sean, with you, like personal development stuff, like what have been the game changers for you, and what are you currently doing?
Yeah. So obviously, like when you and I first met, I shouted you out a ton. And for those listening, like I followed Cody for a really long time. And I used to like pass by that rent and exit. And I was like, man, if I can get my shit together before meetings in Seattle, like maybe I could take Uber down there and like get a quick workout and be like, hey man, what's up? I love your stuff. And so, yeah. And so part of like personal development is sort of like, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, Cody, but surrounding yourself with good people. And so I've been very fortunate in that, especially through swimming, I've been around really good pockets of individuals. So for instance, when I was swimming here in Austin, I swam with a lot of guys who eventually went on to make the Olympics. And I didn't really realize it at the time, how special that was. But then as I got older, I realized like, wow, I keep getting included in these amazing groups. And so it's like, now that I'm aware of that, and like one of our favorite sayings for our clients is awareness precedes change. Once I'm aware of it, now I can, you know, double down on it. Now I can actually do, you know, act towards this goal. And so both Dala and I are big fans of trying to seek out people who have similar goals. They're striving towards the same things, and they're also great people. And we leave interactions feeling good and feeling positive, feeling supported. But in addition to the group, for me personally, reading books. So like I mentioned, you know, following you for a while, you once posted like performance nutrition, which I've now recommended to a ton of clients and a ton of people looking to get into coaching. I'm a big fan of reading. I'm a big fan of like Tim Ferriss and his compilations of what people do to be successful, who are titans in their own right, whatever that is. Big time meditator. YouTube videos are great.
You journal and goal set really well.
Yeah. And then trying to, just continue like be a lifelong learner, but it's challenging when you're out of school and no one's giving you a curriculum. You have to create that curriculum yourself. And it's really cool that we've now surrounded ourselves with amazing people here in Austin. Like we all share resources, and we share books, we share documentaries, and like things that that will help us all, you know, be better, not only as coaches, but as people.
I love that. I love the quote. I've said this so many times. Awareness precedes change. It's so huge. If you don't know, you can't change it, right? And I think I have a friend that he was interested in personal development and stuff, and I'd be like, oh, dude, like you should check out this book. Oh, well, I don't read. Like I fucking hate reading. I'm like, oh, well, there's an audiobook. Man, it's so dry. I can't stand listening to audiobooks. Well, you should start journaling. I don't know how to journal. I'm like, dude, you have to change in order to see the change you want to see. Like, and you have to be aware that like, and this is what's cool about Tim Ferriss's stuff. I love biographies because you can learn about how individuals live their life, and successful individuals at that. And seeing like the commonalities, like you said, meditate, you said reading this, you said surround yourself. Like if you look at every successful person, it's like, oh yeah, they do that too. They do that too. That's actually why I started meditating. I was like so resistant of it. And I was like, it can't be like a coincidence that all these successful and happy people meditate. There
It's a
has to be
blueprint.
something to it. It's a blueprint. That's what it is.
Totally. I can hit you with a stat too. The difference between titans of industry, like people who have, CEOs, they're Fortune 500, they read on average 35 books a year. Do you want to guess how many books the average American reads?
I think I know this. I think it's like 8.
Maybe
1.5.
1.5. Yeah.
Man, that was
Can't get through the second one.
Holy
so like you said,
shit.
Cody, if people want to make a difference in their life, you're right. Meditation, like in Tim Ferriss's books, he says that like 80% of the people he interviews meditate in the morning. So rightly so, you were like, I better fucking start meditating. Mm-hmm. And when I read that stat about the books, I was like, well, if I want to just like, if there are these blueprints and these things that I can do to be better, that's an easy one. And if I fail, quote unquote, and I read 10 books in a year, 12 books in a year, that's still better than the 1.5 everybody else is averaging.
1.5. That is crazy. But again, like success leaves clues. Like that's so cool to see that. And I think the last thing I want to say about what you went through is the journaling. Like if you have any tips for that, I get that all the time. Like, well, what should I journal? And to me, it's really about reflection. And again, going back to awareness precedes change. If you don't reflect on what's going on in your life, you will never be aware of what needs to change. Right. Mm-hmm. But what are you doing? Like both of you guys, how are you journaling? What are you journaling? Like, what do you use that as a tool?
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, you go first.
I agree with you, Cody. I think journaling, and this is what we were actually on a Zoom with our team last night, excuse me, talking about why journaling. And like, I'm sure in y'all's relationship, like you and your wife talk about something and you're really not getting it. Like she can tell you a million times, or you can tell her a million times. And then maybe like your brother says something, or like a friend of hers says something. And then one of y'all is like, oh, I get it immediately. And that's because like you guys, us, are like so in the weeds, we can't see the forest for the trees, right? And so journaling allows us to do that by ourselves. And so when you journal and you just like write out, because I tell people it doesn't need to be like a Dear Diary type journal. It can just be like a stream of consciousness, right, or like writing down things that come up to you. But then when you get it down on paper, you can be that 30,000 foot viewer and you can look at your shit and be like, oh, I want to fix that. That sucks. Let me do that. That's great. Let me do more of that. Da, 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 da. And so instead of, for those people who can't hire a coach or they don't have the monetary, ability to do so, like journaling is a great way to apply that to their own life personally.
I think it's almost like a door to coaching too, like me and my wife have the same life coach, and like sometimes, like you said, like hearing it from two different perspectives or like discussing the same topic with two people, it's night and day, especially the more emotionally bought in you are with somebody, the more I think sometimes it actually gets clouded, unfortunately. But I love that. I think journaling is almost like self-coaching in a way. Mm-hmm. Do you journal as well?
Yeah, I love journaling. And some of the best advice that I ever got for journaling was sit down and brain dump without judgment. Mm-hmm. Because like that was something that I too was like, okay, well, what's the prompt? And like, am I answering the prompt well? And what's funny is I think like going back to grade school, you're taught how to write, you're taught how a paragraph needs to sound and it has to flow and your papers are reviewed. And if you stray from the idea, then you get an F and it's unclear. And so when you take that pen to paper, you're kind of like, I had this immediate, like, this needs to be perfect. I actually competed in writing in high school at like state events and stuff. And so I always had this pressure that it needed to be something. And then it just clicked for me one day when somebody was like, no. Don't even think about what you're going to write. Sit down, put music on, light some incense, light a candle, like, set the mood for yourself. But, and then just start brain dumping, like Sean said, stream of consciousness, and that you're not allowed to judge any of the statements that come out. And they were like, just ferociously dump all over the paper and don't even think about the sentence that you just wrote, just keep writing. And then you're going to look back on it afterwards. And I felt like once I went into journaling with that mindset, I was actually able to use journaling the way it's intended to.
I love how you said that you wanted to set the mood, because I can say this, I mean, obviously it's changing, but like you're in Washington State and it's legal, but I smoke a little weed and then journal. And it's amazing the epiphanies that come to you. And I like would earmark the page and I'm like, oh man, I need to do this more.
So I think I do this thing called the stack, right? And it's something that I have from a coaching group that I did. And it's kind of stemmed from a book. Have you guys ever read Loving What Is?
Have not.
You would love that book. No pun intended.
Love what
But
it is.
yeah, Loving What Is by Byron Katie. I actually enjoy the audiobook more because you hear her talking clients through the situations after each like section. It's one of the most powerful books I've ever read of how she got out of depression. But it's about asking yourself the right questions, and specifically about judging yourself and judging others. And I do something almost daily, and it's like a series of questions for a journal prompt. And the first one is, who or what has made you angry, sad, upset, pissed, like all these irritated? And you have to say yourself for this reason or this person for this reason. And then after that, it's if you could scream at this person, what would you say? And it's like getting the rage out. And it's really kind of dark sometimes. But then halfway through, it flips the script and you have to rewrite the story with your name and open up scenarios where you do the same exact thing and you're probably just a hypocrite. So for me, like if me and my wife are in like an argument or anything, I'm gonna go do a stack and I'll just like go right. And then I come back way more logical and less emotional. And I'm like, all right, here, you know what I mean? And we can just like talk through it. But it's, but the thing about it is it's very uncomfortable and it's very hard to write without fear of judgment. Nobody else is going to read this. So it doesn't matter what I say, but you're so afraid of putting it on paper. So I love that you put that without judgment, because I think that's the hardest thing. And it's funny because I had a couple more questions I wanted to ask you guys today. And I wanted to kind of stay away from fitness just because we always talk about fitness. And when I think of you two and like what I respect and love about you guys, it's not necessarily fitness. I know you guys know your shit, but to me, it's personality, it's personal development, it's success, it's you guys being together, your positive mindsets. Like just meeting you guys was so cool because I had no idea who you were, and you were so opening and cool. And same with Jordan, like that whole group of people. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about is judgment and comparison. Like we're in a social media age and we're online coaches who are constantly on social media. How do you guys find balance with that? And I know balance is kind of one of those words. I always say balance is bullshit because I think, and I guess we could spin this to like, how do you guys balance your relationship? But you're going to spend the most time on whatever needs the most attention, which means there is no balance from a time perspective. But how do you guys stay being present? How do you guys avoid that comparison, avoid judgment, all those kind of things? I know it's like a whole bunch of shit wrapped in one.
Yeah.
Go for a rant.
Another favorite quote is comparison is the thief of joy.
I was literally going to be like, do you want
who wants to drop it? Obviously, we're really into helpful quotes like that. And then I always tell myself, there's always going to be a million people more successful than me. And there's always going to be a million people, less successful than me that I can help. And just recognizing that that's incessant and that that's always going to exist and you can't fix it. I think that sometimes people get caught up in the rat race of comparing themselves to that person right in front of them. And then even if they can surpass them, then there's another like enemy right in front of them. And then there's somebody else, right in front of them. And they're just so obsessed with trying to like chase the ladder to the top that like, their own values are being stripped, or like their mission, they're not in alignment with their mission anymore, or they're letting like quality and actually giving a shit about people fall to the wayside. And, I can't remember where I heard this. I think it's from like a book or somebody famous, but it was like the 30-30-30 rule that 30% of the people in your life should be your mentor that you're learning from. 30% of the people in your life should be your peer. And then 30% of the people in your life should be somebody that you are actively mentoring and that you always want to stay right in the middle. And then I can't remember what the other 10% was. It might've been for like romantic partners or something, but it was saying that it is best and that you will thrive best as a human if you're right in the middle. And so, when you're caught in that moment of comparison, just thinking like, no, that person's in my 30. Like that person kind of like needs to be there in that space to keep me balanced.
I love
It's
that.
been challenging. It's been challenging for me, just being completely honest. Also because I think, Instagram it's like a voyeuristic aesthetic medium. And just speaking plainly, women have more followers than men. And even though I try to meditate and disassociate myself from like likes and followers and comments, like it does impact a little bit. Also, the fact that, Dala's following is larger than mine. And so I've had to continue to practice this and remind myself that, one, following doesn't matter. Two, at the end of the day, we're a team. But the third one is just, again, trying to bring it inward. And I think this is from my experience as a swimmer. It's a me versus me sport. Like even lifting, it's a me versus me sport. Like even, I know you're a big skater, you know, to a certain extent, if you're outside of a tournament or a competition, like it's kind of a me versus me type of thing. It's like, can I do this trick? You know, and it doesn't depend on anybody else. And so
You versus past you.
yeah. And like, you know, again, bring it back to fitness, but reminding people that like they want to go from like point A to point C, and they're at point B and they've lost like 15 pounds and they're like, but God damn it, like I want to be here today. It's like, hey, don't forget like how far you've come. And so I try to tell myself when I get caught in the comparison game, because we all do, is that at the end of the day, I'm competing with myself, and I'm competing with like my own happiness, my own self-worth, and my own like who I want to be. And so if I can pause in that moment and like Dala said, remind myself like, hey, if this was a decade ago, Sean would be like standing ovation, like you're doing great, dude, you know, and go back further, 15-year-old Sean would have his mind blown, like what we've been able to do. And so being in that moment, being present and trying to remind myself that at the end of the day, it's me versus me.
I love that. I think it's such good advice. And I think it's definitely easier said than done. And I think that's where I struggle when giving advice, because I'll even say like, my wife used to get so mad at this. We'd be arguing and I'm like, hey, hold on. Like, what's the point of arguing? Like, are you leaving me? No, of course not. Okay, well then let's just stop. What's the point? This is like, we're just, you know what I mean? And she's like, no, because we have to get a point across. And I think sometimes I try to tell people, you know, just look at the positive side, or just give it a shot, or, you know, take a risk. Like I'm very kind of just go with the flow and I just take action. If it doesn't work, like it doesn't work, and I keep going. But that's easier said than done. You know, I think that's more of a personality type. So I like the way you went about that, because it's more practical, and it shows that it's a work in progress, because even people like you struggle with that. You know, even people like me, not paying attention to likes is like one of the most difficult things as somebody who markets on Instagram, you know, because realistically, and whether people realize this or not, likes don't equal dollar signs, but
right.
They also don't equal clients or transformations or anything like that we're doing. But it's very hard, because that's like the metric we see right away. That's like validation, you know? And I think that it almost, and you guys can kind of give me your opinion on this if you want, it almost comes down to loving yourself more first, you know what I mean? And like really accepting who you are and being happy with. It's like one of the reasons why I'm so thankful my wife doesn't have a Facebook. She barely has an Instagram. She like deletes it half the time. Doesn't put personal information. She's so disassociated with that it's cool, because sometimes we'll see people on Instagram and be like almost like a celebrity status, you know? Like I know fitness professionals that I look up to, and she's like, who the fuck is that? Like, I don't care. You know what I mean? And it reminds me like, oh, we're just humans. Like, she humbles me, you know what I mean? But I really do think it comes down to that self-love first, as like woo-woo as that sounds.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. And honestly, Cody, it's why I was so hyped to like go up and say what's up to you in Scottsdale, was because, and I think this is also symptomatic of growing up in Los Angeles, and like you're literally taught like, hey, if you see a celebrity, like they're a person too, and they might be your neighbor, and like don't bug them, but like say what's up and be like, yo, I loved your movie, and then leave them alone. And that's how I approached you. I was like, well, Cody's a human, and like I just want to gas him up a little bit, because he has made a positive impact on my life. And so remembering that we all are human at the end of the day. We all are going through the same, you know, comparison games. We're going through the same issues and the same challenges in life. And then that puts us all on the same playing field.
Yeah. I think if COVID did one thing, it definitely put us all on the same playing field too. It taught a lot of people a lot of things about everything we're talking about, really. I mean, I think the most time I've ever had for personal development started when COVID hit. And I really started looking at myself in a different light and started picking apart, in a positive way, picking myself apart and seeing what I can get better on. But it's so true, man. So true.
Yeah. I want to add a point on this, because also I'm gonna again use a sports reference, but say that like this is Dala, and we really vibed on this during quarantine. Because they have those sayings like you lock yourself in the gym. And so like I used to play basketball and swim when I was growing up. And in basketball, they say like lock yourself in the gym if you want to get better. And so there's this player, Jimmy Butler, who plays for the Miami Heat right now. And he, 2 years into his NBA career, sucked. And so between his second and third year, he got rid of social media, he got rid of TV, got rid of internet, and he just hooped. And he came out in that third year, he added like 11 points per game to his average. He made an all-star game, got a huge contract, and he's now like the shit.
Jimmy gets buckets.
Yeah. And so Dala now loves like the NBA because of me. And so when quarantine happened, Dala was like, yo, let's like go Jimmy buckets on them. Like we have all the distractions are gone. Like we weren't pissed. Like, oh, we can't go to movies. Like can't go out to eat. Dala was like, this is dope. Like all the distractions are taken away. Like now we can just get after our business and like helping people and like doing our thing. So yeah, in that way, COVID kind of helps us out. And also
That's so
like
true.
the NBA is in a bubble right now. So they're all in like their own quarantine to be able to play. And
Yeah.
apparently somebody called in a noise complaint on Jimmy Butler because he was dribbling in his hotel room. And when they came to tell him to stop, he was like drenched in sweat, just like going at it. And so
Oh,
we
that's
kind of use
hilarious.
him and like Kobe Bryant, others like that who have insane work ethics to help inform how we do things.
Well, that's another thing that's easier said than done. That's a common trait among successful people is that they immediately shift their mind and their focus to something positive that could come from whatever.
Mhm.
Because I did the same thing. As soon as it hit, I was like, okay, this could be scary, but what should I be reading? Because I'm gonna have more time to read. I should probably get some more audiobooks because I'm gonna go on walks with my like by myself
Right.
and with my daughter all the time. Now that I have more time, we have all these trails by my house, but like I just started thinking of all the shit that I could do. I started this like coaching course on basically how to be a better husband and father. Like I started doing so many different things because I was like, why not? This is the
Yeah.
universe saying like, hey, you got some time, do something with it. Don't be lazy, you know. But I think that's the thing that I see common with you guys and with many successful people is they actually do that. They think that way right away.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes right now that Sean and I both have been talking about is you are what you repeatedly think.
Mm,
And when things like COVID hit, you do have a choice. You could be like, this is the worst. My gym's going to close. I can't do this. I can't do that. Can't. Worst. Terrible. And you can absolutely convince yourself that that's the story. Or you can think like, what is possible? What do I have more time for? What do I have more space for? Like, oh, I hated commuting. I hated traffic. Isn't it cool that I get to do this instead? Isn't it cool that I can get creative with at-home workouts? And it's just two different trains of thought, two people that, you know, in a lot of ways are having the same experience. And so like some people are just looking for the negatives out the gate, and other people are looking and finding the silver linings.
And I think this is where the comparison game can kind of go the other way because, you know, you really tapped into, I was a history major. So your Industrial Revolution reference like really stuck
mm,
with me. You know, we're all inside and as a history major and like my grandfather fought in World War II and was actually part of a group that freed a lot of the Jews that were in one of the internment camps. And so my mind immediately went to like, how is this life now in 2020 being quarantined, stuck inside compared to like World War II? Compared to other times in history when people were like held against their will without TV, without internet, without a cell phone, without social media, without the ability to go get food. Like when they shut it down and they were like, hey, you can only go to the grocery store and the pharmacy. My mind still went to like, okay, well, I've heard these like crazy stories coming out of like Poland back in the late 1930s, early 1940s, where people couldn't even get bread or like that was the only thing they could get. And they had people telling them to go fuck themselves the entire time. And it's like, I can get on a Zoom with our family. Like Dala and I can have like Zoom date night. We can do a podcast. Like, and so I would sometimes use the comparison game to make me feel better about what I was going through.
I think that's the positive way to use comparison, right? I think that and
Yeah.
it's really just perspective. I think people's perspective somewhat determines their actions and their success. And I always say like everything's a choice. Like your results are a choice, your health is a choice, your success is a choice, your happiness is a choice because you have to have the perspective and take action on these things. So I love that you use that reference at the end, and I think that's perfect. I could probably literally go on and on with you guys because there's just so many things we have in common when it comes to this spectrum. So I'm glad we really just kind of harped on personal development today.
Yeah.
But before we close out, where can everybody find you guys? Where's all your content, all that stuff, so we can make sure people can go check you out?
Okay, I'll go first. Well, you should go first. Like,
Okay. My Instagram is Dala Loves Dumbbells. My name is actually spelled Dala like Dala. My nickname used to be Dollar Bills, but yeah, Dala Loves Dumbbells. And our company is DLD Nation. So our Instagram, website, everything is DLD Nation.
yeah, so dldnation.com. You can find me via Instagram. It's Fitness Shaman. And yes, there are 3 S's in the middle that kind of throws people off. So Fitness Shaman on Instagram. You can find us, like Dala said, through the DLD Nation Instagram account. And then also I'm like 1,000 like LOL about followers, but I'm about 1,000 followers away from 10K. So I can do a swipe up. And so until then, you can find links to, you know, apply for our team, all those other fun stuff, including a podcast that I'm excited to have you on at some point too, Cody.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's funny because coming onto this, I was like, I hope they say her name first because I knew I was going to butcher it because I couldn't remember how you pronounced it last time I met you. And I was like, man, I hate when I butcher names.
Dude,
So
everybody says Dala, but
I
I
thought it was
always
Dala.
like give them grace because I'm like, my parents should have given me a Y, like Kayla with a D. That would have been so solid.
Yeah. And then
Also,
with
oh, go
yours,
for it.
I literally, I remember this was either right before we met or like right after we met. And I'm horrible with names, but Jordan he mentioned your name and I was like, oh, I'll have to go check that person out. Like, I don't know. He's like, yes, you do. The fitness shaman. I was like, oh yeah, of course. Yeah. I know you're talking about, but it's funny how Instagram names can do that. You know, like if you see somebody's like Instagram name and it's not their actual name, like when I bring my wife places and people call me Boom Boom, she thinks that's the weirdest thing, but people know me as, you know what I mean? So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
It reminds me of like rap names. And
Yeah.
so like it's like, oh, it's Doug Aesthetics. Like, oh, it's
Yeah.
Dale Los Dumbbells.
Sam Miller
Yeah.
Science.
Yeah, exactly. So it's fun in that way. It's funny that Jordan mentioned that because when they invited us, like Jordan and Aaron turned us on to the event in Scottsdale, and then we were looking through and I saw you were there and I was like, oh, like we were already gonna go, but I was like, all right, now we're definitely gone. And I mentioned Jordan and Jordan was like, yeah, I'll like mention you to him. Like I'd love to introduce you guys. And I was like, he won't know who I am, but like he should remember like the likes and the follow and like the comments and stuff. So it's funny that you were like, oh yeah, like that guy. I know that guy.
Yeah, 100%. And your last name is like Scottish or Irish or something?
It's Irish. Yeah, McDevitt.
Okay, you don't look Irish, so that kind of threw me off too. And I'm Irish, McBroom, so obviously, but
Yeah.
but that kind of threw me off too. But I'll let you guys get going. I won't take too much more of your time. I appreciate you guys coming on. This was really fun. And yeah, thank you for spending the time with me.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks, Cody.